question until that last half. So yeah, I'll answer the first half because I think it's actually important. So I really do think it's key to get that innovative piece in there, and I also don't think it's out of reach for anyone. I really, if you take some very mundane research ideas and you insert 1 to 2 hours of brainstorming with 4 or 5 people around the table that just thinking out loud, and I guarantee you're going to end up coming up with some twist on that becomes really innovative and interesting, because conversations naturally float that direction, and people who are smart end up having really interesting and innovative ideas if you interact enough with each other. So I think that's an exercise you always want to take. It's always worth that extra few hours of thinking through what's the real interesting twist here? What's the thing we can think of that nobody else has? And if you can do that, that's often the difference between something you either don't get published or you get published in a C-level journal versus something you can get into an A-level journal, right? I'm going to punt on the second half of that question.
You have so many.
Well, I can't talk about what I think is the most important thing yeah, but the one I liked the most is the couple of papers I published with Karu Peterson. And it essentially was deriving a way to determine if we have an estimate of the risks that people chose and the risks that they did not choose, we can find the minimum concavity of a utility function that would rationalize what they did. And the reason why I really like this, first off, is because you can actually solve that problem, which I was shocked at when I discovered that it could be solved. And second off, because almost always when you take the empirical distributions that are out there and try and find a utility function that rationalizes the behavior, you end up finding that it has to be a negatively sloped utility function, which tells us all our modeling is wrong, which is sort of fun.
So yeah, so 2 responses. So the first one, should I focus on innovation, right? Yes, but then when you say those things to a student, the answer will be, where should I start? Because innovation of what? So first of all, I think, you need to follow a step-by-step approach, find your space, what you like, look at the literature you have in your space. Sometimes a good idea is just an advancement of something that already exists, and not all your papers will be new ideas or innovations. So try to also have a mixture of contributions that could potentially then make you a very competitive job market candidate. As for the research idea, I think that the one that I really liked the most, and is also because the process that we followed, and is a paper that is co-authored with Jayson, is the food basket. So I like that paper for so many reasons. The first one is because it was a completely irrational process. So I was pregnant, we collected the data, and then we said, okay, now what? We didn't know what to do. So I went to Purdue and we stayed 2 days in a room talking about what can we do? How can we analyze the data? And those were 2 very intensive but so unique days where I learned a lot of brainstorming, and that paper has been a great source of joy, but also disappointments. We got so many no's by so many people. And then, I was like, do you think, Jayson, this is just like something crazy? Or so be ready, right? Sometimes when you introduce some new tools, people can be very critical as well, but continue, find the right space. At some point, you will find the right house for your paper. But again, it's not only the idea, it's not only the innovation, but also the process that is important. Enjoy what you do and share this time with very good collaborators.
Yeah, I would also think without innovation, it will be just so hard to publish the paper. So find your innovation, take a risk, a calculated risk. And I don't know what the most innovative thing was I did. But when I wrote my dissertation, my advisor said, write about food quality. And if you Google food quality, I don't even know how many million entries there are. And I started with all the definitions, and there are already so many. So I thought I'll write about perception, consumers' perception of food quality. And that's why I'm so stuck on definitions, right? So I started defining perception, and perception has different components, but one is that you can build it or you can understand it as cognitive structures. And cognitive structures can be described as an associative or semantic network. So I got to network modeling, and I still actually use network models, but that is semantic network analysis. And I found in the teaching literature concept mapping. And if you don't know what that is, it's kind of like a mind map. And I thought, since I want to collect data, maybe my innovation can be to use this method that they use to get the knowledge out into the brain, right? Like it's like, that's how you learn. You build concept maps, and when you build them, you remember. In class, I always say, like, what is a zoo? And you start, a zoo has a tiger and a lion and a flamingo and all of those things, right? And then you have your concept map, and then you build your cognitive structure in your brain. So I thought, like, can I get it out? Can I get that out? And I presented in the doctoral seminar, and everybody said this will never work. Consumers will not do it. They also did it for my second paper, and funny enough, it worked. But participants had no problem at all. Like, I had to, my innovation was probably to come up, I came up with instructions. I thought, like, how can I explain to participants what they are supposed to do, right? The different steps. And it worked so well. Some people write down 50, 60 things, right? It's food quality. I chose pork quality, potato quality, and they just wrote it down. And why do I use this example? Because in 2020, during COVID, one of your students, Agnese from University of Reading, as a PhD student, emailed me and said, I read your papers on concept mapping, and I want to do that for plant-based eggs. And it was COVID, and I want to do that online. And I said, that's funny. During my dissertation, we actually paid an IT company to build me an app, but that was in 2004. So they gave me something, it worked, but not really. So I said, like, well, it would be great if we could do that. And then she says, oh no, when you use Qualtrics, they can draw it and they can upload files. Totally changed my life 20 years later. And we did that. And then she published that, so on plant-based eggs, but also as a contribution on how to use this method in an online setting. So really long story, but it's close to my heart.
I think I forgot the question now. No, there's a very strong view in economics that I disagree with, which is that your most important and innovative work will be in your dissertation. And it's why there's so much emphasis on the job market paper, that this will be the pinnacle of your career. And I think that is a very strong view. And I think I'm telling you this because that is how you will be judged. When you go on the job market, people will say, this is the best you can do. I don't agree with that at all, but I am telling you, that's the view. You are only going to be as innovative as you are when you in that sort of dissertation paper. So I think if for no other reason, there's a strong societal belief in the economics literature, at least, that if you're signaling in that dissertation how innovative you can be, and if you can't do it there, you're not going to do it. And now, why do I disagree with that? I think because my own life experience. Like if I look at my most cited papers, there were early papers that did my career, and I would say they were entirely by accident. Like I was working experimental methods, auctions, choice experiments. I happened to have an advisor who was doing those things. I read some papers on choice experiments. I think we were being innovative. I thought I was trying to do innovative stuff, but I would say it wasn't like me being strategic to say, oh, if I worked in these areas, this will be amazing and innovative. It was just like I happened to find myself in an environment where the stuff I was working on turned out to be kind of novel. And so if I look back on the things that I'm most proud of, they're probably not my most cited things because they're things that came later that I think are probably a little more innovative, like the inferred valuation stuff that I've done. And it led to some theoretical stuff about why sort of theories about why we think hypothetical bias exists, or it's like work on reference price stuff that we did with Vincenzina, where there's a lot of like like math modeling that we combine with data that have theoretical predictions, and then we can back it up with the data. Like some of those things I'm probably more proud of. This conjoint auction conjoint method that we developed into this, this calibrated choice experiment method. Like those things are things like I feel like I had much more sort of intellectual stake in and sort of charting the way in terms of what I think was important. And I'll mention one other paper because when it speaks to this comparative advantage too. So I have a paper in the Economic Journal with a set of French authors about fat taxes and thin subsidies. I didn't collect any of that data. I was not involved in the original design of it at all, but I happened to be visiting those authors when they were talking about what they were doing. And I said, I think this could be really important. And they said, well, can you help us write this paper? So if you read that paper, I wrote 90% of those words, but it had nothing to do with the experimental design of that. But that was my comparative advantage. I thought I can sell why this is important and what was done here, why it's really critical in the literature and makes a contribution. And so I think that's like a really good example of like, I'm really proud of that because I feel like that was my comparative advantage combined with their comparative advantage that really produced this outcome. So I guess what I'm saying is innovation matters a lot. A lot of your successes and failures will be totally by chance and accidental. And I would say play the long game because I think anybody who tells you, and I heard it when I was early in my career, well, you're sort of, you're intellectual, you're sort of at the top of your intellectual knowledge and capacity when you graduate with your PhD, and it's sort of downhill after that. I'd say if that's true, that's by choice and it's a mistake. You do not end when you get your PhD. You're learning all the time and hopefully you're growing and you're continually hoping to do better stuff. You aim to be like a fine wine that gets better over time.